Hey everybody, Ronan here. Great to be back in the office again after some travels. So I took a couple of days off, well, about a day and a half from being online, which was good to do. I think January has been probably the most busiest January I've ever had, and productive. For those of you trolls on LinkedIn who think there's something wrong with being busy. I enjoy being busy and productive, and so there's nothing wrong with being busy, by the way. Just there's a lot of stuff out there saying, oh, stop being busy, blah blah blah. Okay, so imposter syndrome. So it's a big one. So I've been somebody asked me recently to do a piece on imposter syndrome. Especially after I did a video, I forget which day it was, but a few days ago, when I was in Singapore, I did a video on the be, do, have. So the best way to have what you want is to deserve it. And that was using a quote from Charlie Munger, actually. So what I was thinking was, to have what you never had, you got to do what you've never done. But before you'll do what you've never done, you've got to become who you've never been. And of course, Charlie Munger, being the genius that he is, condensed all of that into one simple sentence, which was, the best way to have what you want is to deserve it. So the word deserve creates a lot of challenges for some people. The imposter syndrome, which is everywhere. I have actually felt it in the past. Early on in this business, I felt it. So I've gone through it. But a lot of people feel it right up to CEO level, actually. And I'm working with CEOs, managing directors, public and private companies, chair level, chairperson level, non-executive directors. And almost everybody I've worked with has had to deal with, in some form, imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is, I don't know what the dictionary definition is. I mean, I don't look this stuff up, but imposter syndrome implies that somebody is in a place where they don't belong. So they're uninvited, they're undeserving. And the word syndrome implies some sort of major thing that's endemic. I don't know about that part, okay, but a lot of people do go through it and they move through it. It's not something that stays with a person forever. So what is it? Where does it come from? How do you deal with it? Well, I think it comes back to the word deserve. So some people, let's say the narcissistic types, and you see them everywhere. So narcissistic types might feel like they're over deserving. Okay, like, oh, I deserve more than I'm getting, and I'm this, and I've got 2 years work experience, and I should be the CEO of Apple. Those kind of people, right? So that's the opposite of imposter syndrome. Okay, imposter syndrome is someone who may or may not have the experience, but they feel like they don't belong. They feel like they don't deserve something. And so that's around their value. That's around their self-value. There's so many ways to go with this. There's so many ways this can manifest for a person. I don't think there's any one way for everybody. This is where it comes from, okay? So I think the road to becoming the road in coming to a level where the person has a low self-value is different for everybody. So how could it potentially happen? Well, imposter syndrome implies that there is more undeservedness than there is deservedness. So let's say if the person had a blueprint, so for someone to say I'm undeserving or I'm an imposter, that means they unconsciously have a blueprint. Whether they've actually articulated it or not, they have a blueprint for what's okay. So they have this unconscious blueprint that says, I need to fit this blueprint in order to be deserving. So the first thing is, what is that blueprint? Bring it into your consciousness is a really good idea. So you could write it down. What's my blueprint? Write it down. In some cases, they're ridiculously unattainable. Some people have blueprints that just are impossible to attain. Okay, so that's the first thing to check. But really importantly, really important to check is if there is an imbalance. If someone is perfectly balanced, perfectly equilibrated in their mind, they don't feel narcissistic and they don't feel undeserving. So, in other words, egotistical in one direction or another. Okay, so I'm not making ego bad. So ego is, I think it's a synonym for the conscious mind. So when you're a human being, you get to have a conscious mind, right? And that's the ego mind. So there's nothing wrong with it. It can be healthy or it can be unhealthy, and there's a spectrum. It can be, really out of control, or it can be fairly under control. But it's always going to be there, as long as we're alive. So let's just say there's an ego mind, and when we're centered, when we're in perfect balance, that ego mind's in check. Okay, so there's no real feeling of, I'm better than everybody, or I'm worse than everybody, or I deserve more than others, or I deserve less than others, or I deserve all these things that maybe I don't deserve, and I'm undeserving of all these things that maybe I do deserve. All of those, whether it's, so-called positive or so-called negative, are of the ego. So if somebody's feeling imposter syndrome, they're in ego mode. So let's say the imposter syndrome feeling is some sort of negativity. So one of the ways that I like to look at these things, and this is kind of maybe a different dimension in thinking for some people, I do my best to remember this as much as I can, and it's this, is that there is a perfect balance going on, right? Whether I know it or not, or whether I care about it or not, there is a balance inherent in nature and in me, right? And in you and in everybody, in all of us. So there is that balance, and that's an actual balance that exists, whether we on the ego level know or not, right? So if that balance exists, and if we're aligned with that balance, then we feel in balance. So that's one of the assumptions that I want to make in terms of the dimensions of thinking here. So if we assume that that's okay and that's correct, so I'm making that assumption that it's true, that in actuality there is a perfect balance that is inherent in me, in nature, in everything. So if I'm in tune with that balance, I'm not going to feel like I'm super deserving, better than everybody, or I'm super terrible, worse than everybody, right? I'm not going to feel either of those two things, and those are extremes, and there's a spectrum, okay? So if I then look at actuality and I go, well, if I feel imposter syndrome, well, that's kind of a bit off balance this way. So there's an equal and opposite reaction all the time. Okay, so if in order to restore a balance, if I go too far this way, then nature is more powerful than me. It calls into effect something else to bring me back into balance. So the same within a person. So I always look for what's the opposite side. So if someone's feeling imposter syndrome, one of the things you can do is, that's the equal and opposite reaction of what, right? So that's an imbalance, meaning there's more imposter syndrome feeling than there is whatever the opposite of that is. So you go, okay, that's counterbalancing something else. So where am I doing the opposite? So for example, is there somewhere else in my job, in my life, where I'm saying, oh, I'm actually superior, okay? Or am I holding some kind of secret thought in my mind that I'm superior? Because if I am, it's not true. And so therefore imposter syndrome could kick in to bring me back into balance. That's one aspect of it. It's not the only part of it. There is more to it. So that could be one way. Another way could be where somebody is feeling guilt or shame around something. So I did a video on that as well. So guilt or shame, guilt and or shame are two of the biggest barriers to receiving what you want. If someone's feeling unresolved guilt and or shame, they're going to feel like they don't deserve something. So feeling guilt or shame implies, it's a psychological construct, and what it does is it implies that there's something that you've done wrong, something that you've done to harm somebody or harm yourself, or violate some laws of some institution, or some culture, or maybe it's within a family, or maybe it's within a company or a country or whatever. Okay, so it's a psychological construct that says I've violated somebody else's laws, values, whatever it might be. If somebody feels that, they might feel guilt or shame. If they feel guilt or shame, they might feel like they don't deserve something. Okay, that's another way. I'm going to come to how you can deal with this. Okay, and a third way maybe that somebody can feel it is intention. So they might have an intention that is at odds with what they're publicly declaring they want. So they might be saying, yeah, I want to be a leader in this company, or I want to run a business, and publicly they're saying they want to do it because they're great and they want to be a pillar of society and they want to be looked up to or whatever, or a role model or a mentor or something. They might be publicly saying that, but privately their intention, their true intention, which they may or may not know about, could be different. It could be in their shadow value. It could be, I want to be in control, I want to make loads of money, I want to be X, Y, and Z, right? If publicly they're saying one thing, but privately their intention is another thing, they might feel like they've got imposter syndrome as well. Okay, so that's another way it could generate. So the things I would say, one other thing with imposter syndrome is being afraid of being found out. So people are thinking, oh, I'm afraid that someone will find out that I don't know what I'm talking about, or that I can't do my job, or a classic for leaders is that I'm not doing any work, right? Because they might be leading a team of 100 or thousands of people, and they're afraid to be found out for not doing the work, that someone else is doing all the work, all that kind of stuff. So that implies they have a blueprint that says, to do this job, I should be doing A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. But in their mind, they're thinking, I'm only doing D and E and A sometimes. So therefore, they feel like they don't deserve it. So what I would really encourage people, if you're dealing with imposter syndrome, or someone who is first of all, check your blueprint for what is deserving. Okay, check to see if it's a fantasy, right? Check to see if it's something that is unattainable. If it's unattainable, tear it up. Okay. The other thing is, if it's reasonable, if your blueprint is reasonable, then you got to build a bridge between your mind and what that is, because chances are you are making a contribution, or else you wouldn't be where you are. Okay, so if you're making a contribution, and this reminds me of something I did with a company a few years ago, where I think it was a small company, maybe 6 or 7 people in the business at the time. It was one of these kind of small consulting firms. They were punching above their weight, really, really good. Just checking my watch here. I've got someone coming soon. Really good company, but sales were dropping. Okay, clients weren't coming. People weren't connecting with them as much, and some of the staff in the company were actually losing interest and enthusiasm. I was working with the CEO of the company at the time, and she was feeling, I'll be honest, I don't remember if she used the word imposter syndrome, but it was everything around imposter syndrome. We don't deserve it, we're losing market share, people aren't coming to us anymore, people are demoralized, all that kind of stuff. So what had happened in that company was they actually took the focus off the people they were serving, and they turned the focus on themselves. And so you can only feel imposter syndrome if you're focused on yourself, right? But if you're really focused on helping somebody, if you're really focused on serving somebody, and you turn all your attention and you put it in the direction of the people you're serving, then there's no focus on yourself. And if all your focus is on serving and helping somebody else, you don't need, and your focus is not on yourself, well, then you can't feel imposter syndrome, because you're focused on helping them. Easy to say. So what did we do? Did a very simple thing. She had a whiteboard in her boardroom in the office in Sydney, Australia, and what I said was, you've had clients in the past who you've helped enormously. You didn't feel this undeservedness before, and neither did your team, so something's happened. Okay, now there are ways to deal with imposter syndrome. In the past, If it's one-to-one, what I've done sometimes is just work with somebody, work with their unconscious mind or with the energy in their body, and let it go forever. It's done, it's gone, right? We can find the source, we can equilibrate where it came from, find the learnings, find the benefits, let it go. Or if it's energy in the body, just let it pass through and it will exit or dissolve, one of those two things. There are others. It takes longer to do it cognitively or through explanations. But one of the other ways you can do it with yourself and with your team is just get in front of a whiteboard. And all I said to her was this: you've got these clients, you're serving them. You've just forgotten how you're serving them. So get your team, sit in front of a whiteboard and take turns writing on the whiteboard. Somebody run it from the beginning and then just take turns and write down everything that you do for your clients that helps them. Okay? So if you help them generate more business, for example, write that down. And how does generating more business help them personally? Maybe they pay their mortgage, put their kids through school, whatever. And fill up that whiteboard with lots of examples and lots of ways that you are contributing to the world, to your customer base, your clients. For this lady's company, a lot of them were senior executives with budget in corporates. So it was how is she and her team and her company contributing to the lives of her clients. And when they filled up that board, with that whiteboard with all these examples of how they're making such a huge contribution, they started to remember. But what it is each thing that they write down is like a string of wire. If you ever see a suspension bridge, it's got these big, massive, steel cables. But those steel cables are made up of individual wires, and each individual wire is probably thinner than the nib on a pen. But when they're all wrapped around together, hundreds of them, thousands of them, they're unbreakable. So everything they write down on that whiteboard is another piece of steel wire. When you have enough of them, they become so strong. If you've built a bridge, and you've built a bridge in your mind, you've built a bridge in your mind between yourself and your offering and your clients, and you've built a bridge of deservedness. So you're starting to realize all the ways that you're serving, all the ways that you're helping somebody, and you realize, oh, hang on, yes, I am helping, and maybe we do deserve it. So she did that in her company. Her deservedness level went up. Her staff, her employees, her team, their deservedness level went up. They were back in mode, helping lots of people, lots of clients, lots of customers, and imposter syndrome non-existent anymore. The focus went on the client, not on them. So that's a really big piece of it. I would say maybe there's a lot in this video. I've probably gone on a bit too long, but maybe go with that. If you've got comments, happy to feedback and happy to get a dialogue going. If you want more video on this, I can do more. As I said, it's a big topic, but there's a lot in this. Hopefully it helps. Get your blueprint, recognize what it is. Is it a fantasy? Is it ridiculous? Scrap it. So just get clear on what a blueprint of deservedness is for you. Write down all the ways that you're contributing to that level of deservedness. Build a new bridge to bring it into your consciousness that you are deserving of it, and raise your self-value. So those are ways to do it. There are lots of other ways. It's just a short piece on Facebook, but I hope this helps somehow. And until next time, all the best.